You think you know what humiliation feels like. Try being a decorated Army veteran, losing your leg to an IED in Afghanistan, and then having some drunk biker trip you in front of an entire bar just because he thought it would be funny to watch the crippled chick fall. What that biker didn't know was that my unit was having their monthly meet just 15 minutes away. And when you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is Honor Echoes, where we share the real stories that happen when you underestimate a veteran. Hit that subscribe button, because these stories need to be heard, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happened next. Let me take you back to that humid Tuesday evening in July, 2023. I was stationed at Fort Campbell for 3 years before my deployment to Afghanistan. And even though I'd been medically retired for 2 years by this point, Louisville still felt like home. The city had this way of embracing veterans, and most people treated us with respect. Most people. I'd been having a rough week. The phantom pain in my left leg, the one that wasn't there anymore, had been acting up something fierce. You know, they tell you about phantom limb syndrome in the hospitals, but they don't tell you how it feels like your missing leg is being stabbed with hot needles at 3 in the morning. They don't tell you how you'll wake up trying to scratch an itch on a foot that's buried in a military cemetery in Arlington. That night, I just needed to get out of my apartment. I'd been cooped up for 3 days straight, working on my disability claim paperwork, and fighting with the VA over my benefits. Anyone who's dealt with the VA knows that fighting is the right word. It's not applying, it's not requesting, it's fighting. Every form feels like a battle. Every phone call like an interrogation where you have to prove you're broken enough to deserve help. I decided to head to Mickey's Tavern on Bardstown Road. Nothing fancy, just a local dive bar where I could nurse a beer and maybe catch the Cardinals game on their old tube TV. Mickey's had this worn-down charm that reminded me of the bars we used to hit when we were stationed in Kentucky. Dark wood, peanut shells on the floor, and bartenders who minded their own business. I walked in around 8:30, wearing my favorite UK Wildcats t-shirt and jeans. My prosthetic was hidden beneath my jeans, and unless someone was really paying attention to my gait, most people couldn't tell. I'd gotten pretty good at walking normally after 2 years of physical therapy. The doctors at Walter Reed had pushed me hard, and I was proud of how far I'd come. The bar was moderately busy for a Tuesday. A few regulars occupied their usual stools, some college kids were playing pool in the back, and there was a group of bikers clustered around a high-top table near the window. These weren't your typical weekend warrior types with pristine Harleys. These guys looked rough, like they'd been riding hard and drinking harder. Leather vests, scraggly beards, and that particular swagger that comes from thinking you're tougher than everyone else in the room. I found an empty stool at the far end of the bar, ordered a Bud Light from Tommy, the bartender I'd gotten to know over the past few months. Tommy was a good guy, former Marine who'd done 2 tours in Iraq. We had that unspoken understanding that veterans have. He knew I was Army without me ever having to say it, and I knew he was a jarhead by the way he carried himself. "Rough day, Mitch?" Tommy asked, using the nickname he'd given me. He had this way of reading people that came from years of tending bar and even more years of watching his brothers' backs in combat. "Rough week," I replied, taking a long pull from my beer. VAS being their usual helpful selves, Tommy just nodded. He understood. We didn't need to dive into the details of bureaucratic nightmares and medical appointments and the constant feeling of having to justify your sacrifice to people who'd never worn the uniform. I was content to sit there, watch the game, and let the ambient noise of the bar wash over me. The Cardinals were down by 3 in the bottom of the 8th, which pretty much matched how I was feeling about life in general. Sometimes you're just behind, and sometimes there's not enough innings left to catch up. That's when I heard the laughter from the biker table get louder and more obnoxious. I glanced over and saw them pointing at different people in the bar, making comments loud enough to be heard, but not quite loud enough to start a fight. They were that special kind of drunk where they thought they were hilarious but everyone else just wanted them to shut up. The biggest one, a mountain of a man with a gray beard and arms covered in faded tattoos, seemed to be their ringleader. He wore a leather vest with patches that suggested he was part of some club. though I couldn't make out which one from where I sat. His voice carried over the ambient noise as he made increasingly crude comments about the other patrons. "Look at that college boy trying to impress his girlfriend at the pool table," he said, loud enough for the couple to hear. "Bet he's never worked a real day in his life." The college kid at the pool table tensed up, but his girlfriend grabbed his arm and whispered something that made him turn back to their game. "Smart girl. Sometimes the best fight is the one you don't have." But the bikers weren't done. Their attention turned to an older gentleman sitting alone at a corner table, quietly reading a paperback novel while nursing what looked like a whiskey neat. "Hey, Professor," the big biker called out, "what's your reading?" 50 Shades of Grey. The older man looked up briefly, shook his head, and went back to his book. He had the bearing of someone who'd seen enough of life to know that engaging with drunk idiots was rarely worth the effort. I was getting annoyed, but I minded my own business. I'd learned in the army that there are battles worth fighting, and battles that just waste your energy. These guys were clearly looking for trouble, and I had enough trouble in my life without borrowing more. But then their attention turned to me. "What about you, sweetheart?" the big one called out. "You look like you could use some company. Why don't you come over here and let us buy you a real drink?" I ignored them, taking another sip of my beer and keeping my eyes on the TV. The Cardinals had managed to get a runner on second base. Maybe there was hope after all. "Hey, I'm talking to you," the biker said, his voice taking on an edge. "It's rude to ignore people when they're being friendly." Tommy caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I shook my head slightly. Not yet. I'd dealt with worse than drunk bikers in Afghan villages where everyone was armed and the stakes were life and death. I could handle some middle-aged men having a midlife crisis on motorcycles. But they weren't giving up. I heard chairs scraping against the floor and heavy footsteps approaching. My muscles tensed instinctively. Years of combat training kicking in, even though I was sitting in a bar in Louisville instead of patrolling the mountains outside Kandahar. "You know, it's not polite to ignore people," the big biker said, now standing directly behind me. I could smell the alcohol on his breath and the stale cigarette smoke embedded in his leather vest. I turned around slowly, keeping my voice level and calm. "I'm just here to watch the game and have a quiet drink. I'm not looking for trouble." "Trouble?" he laughed, and his buddies joined in like some kind of Greek chorus of stupidity. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just being friendly. Unless you think you're too good for us regular folks." That's when I noticed he was swaying slightly, drunker than I'd initially realized. His pupils were dilated, and there was a sloppy quality to his movements that suggested he'd been drinking for hours. "I don't think I'm too good for anyone," I said, still keeping my voice calm. "I just want to finish my beer and watch the game." "What game?" "The Cardinals." He glanced at the TV dismissively. "They suck anyway. Just like this whole city. Just like most of the people in it." I felt my jaw tighten. "You can insult me all you want, but don't insult my city." Louisville had been good to me, had welcomed me home when I needed it most. The city had programs for veterans, people who cared, and a community that understood sacrifice. "I think maybe you and your friends should head home," I said, standing up from my bar stool. "You've clearly had enough to drink." That's when everything went sideways. As I stood up, my prosthetic caught slightly on the bar stool's footrest. It was a minor thing, barely noticeable, just a tiny hitch in my movement that lasted maybe half a second. But this drunk idiot noticed it, and his alcohol-soaked brain made the connection. Well, he said, his voice taking on a nasty, mocking tone. "Looks like we got ourselves a gimp." The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard it before, of course. You don't lose a leg in military service without encountering every possible slur and insult. But hearing it in a bar in my own city, from someone who'd clearly never put his life on the line for anything more important than his next drink, made my blood boil. "Excuse me," I said, my voice dropping to the low, dangerous tone that my soldiers used to recognize as a warning. "You heard me, pegleg," he said, getting louder and drawing more attention from the other patrons. "What happened? Born that way? Or did you lose it in some accident?" "Let me guess. Drunk driving." Tommy was moving toward us now, coming around the bar with the purposeful stride of someone who'd broken up more fights than he cared to count. But he was too far away, and things were happening too fast. "I lost my leg serving my country in Afghanistan," I said, loud enough for everyone in the bar to hear. "I was a staff sergeant in the United States Army, and I lost my leg to an improvised explosive device while protecting people like you." For a moment, I thought that might end it. Most people, even drunk people, have enough decency to back down when they realize they're messing with a combat veteran. Most people have at least a shred of respect for military service. But this guy wasn't most people. "Oh, boo-hoo," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "The little soldier girl got hurt playing war. Maybe next time you should stay in the kitchen where you belong." The bar had gone completely quiet now. Even the college kids had stopped playing pool. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. I felt something snap inside me. Not the controlled anger I'd learned to manage in combat, but something deeper and more primal. This worthless piece of garbage was mocking not just me, but every soldier who'd ever been wounded in service to their country. He was spitting on the memory of my friends who didn't make it home at all. "You need to walk away," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Right now." But instead of walking away, he smiled. It was the kind of smile that predators get when they think they've found easy prey. "Or what? You're gonna hop after me?" And then he did it. He stuck his foot out as I took a step toward him and tripped me. I went down hard, my prosthetic catching awkwardly as I fell. I hit the floor with my full weight, my shoulders slamming into the sticky bar floor that probably hadn't been properly cleaned since the Clinton administration. The impact knocked the wind out of me and sent a shooting pain through my hip where the prosthetic connected to my body. But worse than the physical pain was the humiliation. Lying there on the floor of Mickey's Tavern, while this drunk biker and his friends laughed at the disabled veteran. Other patrons were staring, some in horror, some in sympathy, but all of them looking at me like I was something to be pitied. "Oops," the biker said, not even trying to hide his satisfaction. "Guess you're not as steady as you thought, soldier girl." His friends were laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. One of them even pulled out his phone to record the aftermath. Tommy was beside me in seconds, helping me to my feet and checking to make sure I wasn't seriously hurt. His face was red with anger, and I could see him calculating whether he could take all 4 bikers at once. "You okay, Mitch?" he asked, his hands steady and gentle as he helped me up. "I'm fine," I said, though I clearly wasn't. My prosthetic had twisted when I fell, and I could feel it rubbing wrong against my residual limb. My shoulder was already starting to ache, and I knew I'd have bruises tomorrow. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the rage building inside me. I'd been humiliated by someone who'd never put his life on the line for anything, never sacrificed anything for anyone else, never earned the right to look down on people who'd served their country with honor. "I think you gentlemen need to leave," Tommy said to the bikers, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd dealt with troublemakers before. "We're not done drinking," the big biker replied. "Besides, it's not our fault she can't walk straight." That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat for Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment. Even though we'd all been discharged or transferred to different units, we still kept in touch. More than that, we still looked out for each other. When you've been through combat together, when you've depended on each other for survival, those bonds don't break just because you're not wearing the same uniform anymore. The group chat was called Bravo Company Brotherhood, and it had 23 members scattered across Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. Some were still active duty, some were veterans like me, but all of them would drop everything if one of us was in trouble. I typed quickly, "Mickey's Tavern on Bardstown Road. Some drunk bikers just tripped me and are making fun of disabled vets. Could use some backup." The responses started coming immediately. Martinez, "On my way. 15 minutes out." Johnson, "Rolling now. Anyone else coming?" Thompson, "Hell yes. Address again." Rodriguez, "Just left Fort Knox. 20 minutes. Within 60 seconds." I had confirmations from 12 members of my old unit. They were coming from all over Louisville and the surrounding area, dropping whatever they were doing to help a sister in arms who'd been disrespected. I looked up at the biker who'd tripped me. He was still standing there, drink in hand, basking in what he thought was his moment of triumph. "You know what?" I said, loud enough for everyone in the bar to hear. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He laughed. "Yeah, what's a crippled army girl gonna do about it?" I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile I used to get when I spotted insurgents who thought they were hidden from our patrol. Me, nothing. I'm going to sit right here and finish my beer. But in about 15 minutes, you're going to meet some friends of mine. And they're going to be very interested in hearing about how you treated a disabled combat veteran. The biker's expression started to change. Maybe it was something in my voice, or maybe he was beginning to realize that tripping a veteran in a military town might not have been his smartest move. "You're bluffing," he said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. I held up my phone, showing him the group chat that was now lighting up with messages from soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors all converging on Mickey's Tavern. "Am I?" Tommy caught on immediately. He'd been part of similar groups when he was active duty. He knew how tight military units were, how veterans looked out for each other long after their service ended. "Gentlemen," Tommy said to the bikers, "I strongly suggest you settle your tab and leave. Now." But the bikers were too drunk and too stupid to take good advice. The big one who'd tripped me puffed up his chest and looked around the bar like he was king of the mountain. "I'm not afraid of some washed-up soldiers," he declared. "This is America. We got freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want." "You're absolutely right," I said, sitting back down on my bar stool and taking a sip of my beer. "You can say whatever you want, and my friends can respond however they want." The next 15 minutes were some of the longest of my life, but also some of the most satisfying. I sat there, nursing my beer and watching the door, while the bikers continued to drink and make increasingly nervous jokes about what they'd do if any army boys showed up. My phone kept buzzing with updates. "Martinez, 5 minutes out. Johnson's with me. Thompson, pulling into the parking lot now. Rodriguez, where do you want us to park?" At 14 minutes and 30 seconds, the door to Mickey's Tavern opened. Martinez walked in first. Luis Martinez had been my radio operator in Afghanistan, a compact Puerto Rican from the Bronx who could carry 200 pounds of equipment through the Hindu Kush Mountains and still have energy to crack jokes. He was wearing civilian clothes, but he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of an infantryman. Right behind him came Johnson. David Johnson from Alabama, our former squad automatic weapon gunner, built like a linebacker and twice as tough. Then Thompson, Rodriguez, Williams, and 8 more members of Bravo Company, all walking through the door of Mickey's Tavern like they were entering a briefing room. The transformation in the bar was immediate and dramatic. Conversations stopped. The college kids backed away from the pool table. Even the regular patrons seemed to sense that something significant was happening. But the most dramatic change was in the bikers themselves. The big one who'd tripped me suddenly looked a lot smaller as he found himself surrounded by 12 combat veterans who'd served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Martinez walked straight over to me, his eyes quickly scanning to make sure I wasn't seriously hurt. "You okay, Sergeant Mitchell?" he asked, using my old rank out of habit and respect. "I'm fine, Martinez. Thanks for coming. Always, Sarge. What's the situation?" I nodded toward the bikers, who were now huddled together like sheep surrounded by wolves. The big one there thought it would be funny to trip a disabled veteran, called me a gimp, told me I should have stayed in the kitchen, and when I fell, he said I wasn't as steady as I thought. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Every single one of my brothers was staring at the bikers with the kind of focused intensity that had made insurgents in Afghanistan very nervous. Johnson stepped forward. At 6'4" and 250 pounds of solid muscle, he had a way of getting people's attention without saying a word. "Is that right?" he asked the big biker, his Alabama drawl making the question sound deceptively casual. "You tripped our sister here, The biker was trying to maintain his tough guy facade, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. It was just a joke, man, no harm, no foul, a joke, Thompson repeated. He was our former medic, the guy who'd patched us up when we got hurt, the guy who'd held dying soldiers in his arms. You think tripping a combat veteran who lost her leg serving her country is funny? Look, we don't want any trouble, one of the other bikers said. He was smaller than their leader, and apparently smarter too. Maybe we should just go. But their leader wasn't ready to back down yet. Alcohol and stupidity are a dangerous combination. I'm not going anywhere, he declared. This is still America. I got rights. You're absolutely right, Martinez said, his voice calm and reasonable. You have rights. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you're smart enough to use it. You have the right to leave this bar under your own power, and you have the right to apologize to Sergeant Mitchell here for disrespecting her service and her sacrifice. The biker looked around the bar, probably hoping for support from the other patrons. What he found instead was a room full of people staring at him with disgust and contempt. Even his own friends were backing away from him. I ain't apologizing to nobody, he said, but his voice cracked slightly. That's when Rodriguez stepped forward. Maria Rodriguez had been our explosive ordnance disposal specialist, the person we called when we found roadside bombs. She was 5'6" and maybe 140 pounds. But she had nerves of steel and a stare that could melt armor plating. Let me explain something to you, she said, her voice soft and deadly. Sarah Mitchell is a staff sergeant in the United States Army. She served 3 tours in Afghanistan. She was wounded by an improvised explosive device while conducting a patrol to protect Afghan civilians from Taliban insurgents. She has a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a Combat Infantry badge. She's earned more respect in 1 day of military service than you'll earn in your entire worthless life. The biker was starting to realize that his situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. He was surrounded by 12 veterans who looked like they'd rather eat glass than let disrespect to one of their own go unanswered. And you, Rodriguez continued, are a pathetic drunk who thinks it's funny to trip disabled veterans. You're the kind of person we took an oath to protect, even though you clearly don't deserve it. The bar was completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on Bardstown Road. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. That's when Williams spoke up. James Williams had been our squad leader, the guy who'd kept us alive through 3 combat deployments. When he talked, people listened. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd given orders in life and death situations. You're going to apologize to Sergeant Mitchell. You're going to mean it. Then you're going to pay for her medical expenses if she needs any. Then you're going to leave this bar, get on your motorcycles, and ride out of Louisville. If we ever see you in this city again, if we ever hear about you disrespecting another veteran, we're going to have a much longer conversation. The biker looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to run. He was surrounded, outnumbered, and rapidly sobering up as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. I'm sorry, he mumbled, not quite looking at me. Louder, Martinez said, and look at her when you say it. The biker raised his eyes to meet mine. I could see fear there now, and something that might have been shame. I'm sorry, he said, louder this time. I'm sorry I tripped you. I'm sorry I called you names. I was drunk and stupid, and I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long moment, this pathetic man who'd thought it would be fun to humiliate a disabled veteran. Part of me wanted to let my brothers teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Part of me wanted to see him crawl out of the bar on his hands and knees, but I was better than that. We all were. Apology accepted, I said. Now get out of my city. The bikers couldn't leave fast enough. They threw money on their table, avoided eye contact with everyone in the bar, and practically ran for the door. We could hear their motorcycles starting up in the parking lot, and then the sound of engines fading into the distance as they rode away. As soon as they were gone, the entire atmosphere of Mickey's Tavern changed. The college kids went back to their pool game. The regular patrons returned to their conversations, and Tommy started serving drinks again. But my brothers from Bravo Company weren't done yet. "You sure you're okay, Sarge?" Martinez asked, pulling up a bar stool next to me. "I'm fine, really. Thank you all for coming." "That's what we do," Johnson said simply. "Nobody messes with family." And that's when it hit me. These weren't just former soldiers who'd served in the same unit. These were my brothers and sisters, my family, the people who'd always have my back no matter what. The bond we'd formed in the mountains of Afghanistan was stronger than blood, stronger than distance, stronger than time. Tommy brought drinks for everyone, refusing to let anyone pay. "These are on the house," he said, "for the finest soldiers I've ever had the honor to serve." We spent the next 2 hours in Mickey's Tavern, sharing stories, catching up on each other's lives, and remembering friends who didn't make it home. It turned into an impromptu reunion, the kind of night that reminds you why military service creates bonds that civilian life can't duplicate. As the evening wound down and my brothers started heading home to their families and jobs, Martinez pulled me aside. "You know we'd do this again anytime, right?" he said. "Day or night, for any reason, no questions asked." "I know," I said. "And I'd do the same for any of you. That's what makes us different from people like those bikers," he said. "We understand loyalty. We understand sacrifice. We understand that some things are bigger than ourselves." That night changed something in me. I realized that even though my military service was over, I was still part of something bigger than myself. I was still connected to brothers and sisters who'd stand up for each other no matter what. The biker learned that when you disrespect one veteran, you disrespect all of us, and we don't let that slide. If stories like this mean something to you, if you believe veterans should be treated with respect and dignity, hit that subscribe button and join the Honor Echoes family. We've got more stories of veterans standing up for each other, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And that's a lesson some people learn the hard way.